What would your leadership look like if you developed emotional intelligence? Welcome back to Cultivating Courage. Jaleesa Dallas here, where we help individuals and organizations cultivate courage in how they live, love, and lead. And we do this by way of helping them break barriers to their success, bolstering their belief for greater confidence, and building brave, bold, courageous behaviors to optimize their life. And so we're here today for part 2 of our Cultivating Courage. Last week we talked about the foundational first stage of cultivating courage, which is about embracing the journey of soul work. We look at support, strategy, systems, sustainability tools, and a standard of living to help us move into routines, habits that get us into a lifestyle shift. And so that's that inner work that we do before we get to the phase of developing emotional intelligence, because that's where it transitions from it being individualized to working in community with others. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you today. And if you haven't already, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone you know. I would truly be grateful for that. So let's get started. For those who are unfamiliar with emotional intelligence, it's essentially where our self-awareness fuels our ability to collaborate. It's where we express and understand our own emotions and how we interact with others and their emotions. There are 5 components of emotional intelligence. I would say maybe a decade ago, there were initially 4, but as of late, at least in my research and my discovery, there is an additional component that finds itself right in the middle, and that's motivation. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But in that space in the middle, that's where we get from intention to impact. So again, we continue with that individualized understanding piece of who we are by the first component being self-awareness. This is where we understand our strengths and weaknesses, our emotional triggers, as well as the ways in which we learn best. There are our values, our beliefs, so many aspects of who we are and how we show up in the world. That is self-awareness. Then from there is self-management or self-regulation. In that space is where we understand ways in which we manage our stress and how we cope with that stress. So that's us regulating our mind, our will, and our emotions. Again, that soul piece of the matter. Because as I mentioned, this is still part of that individualized stage. In this self-management stage, it's one way that we understand our groundedness and we get more clarity on, again, how we respond instead of react, because there's a difference. When we respond, we're more thoughtful, we're more intentional, whereas when we react, it's very emotionally driven, and sometimes it can create bigger problems than there needs to be. Whereas us being responsive to things really helps us to navigate those spaces where we're having conversations or where we're connecting with people that much better. And so back to the middle part of the 5 components of emotional intelligence. Motivation. This is what drives our intention. Again, what drives our motives, why we do the things that we do. And so in this space, that's where we transition from our intention as individuals, the self-awareness, self-management, intentional aspect of the individual, into shifting into impact, where we get to explore empathy and relationship management. Here in motivation, we determine what fuels us and what connects us to the values for which we deem important. Then we shift into empathy, and this is where we essentially read the room. We build our capacity for understanding in this space. Also in empathy, it helps us to connect with others more authentically. We're able to resonate with another person's experience, and more so their emotional connection to fear, happiness, exhaustion. We're able to relate in these emotional spaces and again gain greater understanding when we practice empathy. The last component of emotional intelligence is relationship management. In this space, I like to highlight the 3 C's, where we examine our communication, where we look at constructive criticism and whether or not we are receiving and giving feedback appropriately, and also confrontation. How do we deal with others? How do we work with others that we are in conflict with? Because we talked about in the soul work stage, it's that inner critic. We're in conflict with ourselves and doing that inner work. So how are we able to take what we've learned from doing that work in confrontation and conflict with ourselves to externally being able to connect with others in conflict and being able to have appropriate conversations? I also like to highlight when we talk about emotional intelligence, especially in the space of self-regulation and self-management, is we use gratitude to regulate our emotions. If you ever thought about it, whenever we express gratitude for something, we experience a peace. We experience a pause. Whereas if we're always in complaint about what we don't have, or the experiences we're not having, or the relationships we're not building, that brings an inner turmoil and conflict with our experiences, our environments. But when we lean into a place of gratitude, we show greater appreciation, we show hopefulness, there's healing that happens in that space, and we find help when we're more appreciative and value the contributions, not only that we contribute to the world, but also the contributions of others. Well, I hope that this was helpful to you. I didn't want to go into great detail of emotional intelligence because for the most part, I would say that it is a concept. It is a way of life that a lot of folks are leaning into now with everything going on in the world. And so I would encourage you to do your due diligence, to do more research on each of these components. A reference that I love and have thoroughly enjoyed reading is The Color of Emotional Intelligence, because it gives a different purview from others that I have read. And also, I personally am working on a book that's going to explore these concepts in more detail, embracing the soul work journey, as well as developing emotional intelligence. And then next week, I'm going to talk about what it looks like to demonstrate bold, brave behaviors in the ways that we live, love, and lead. So if you caught it, the embracing the journey of soul work was breaking barriers to our success. Bolstering our belief for greater confidence includes developing emotional intelligence, and building brave, bold behavior is demonstrating how we live, love, and lead courageously. So I look forward to talking to you about the third stage on next week. And until next time, let your soul work be your best work to a better you. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone you know. Have a great one. Bye.